Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Authentically Connected with Dr. Rachel Faust. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. As always, anything that I share here is for informational purposes only and is not meant to replace advice or direction given by your own doctor or personal therapist. With that being said, I am so excited to introduce my guest today. Dr. Teresa Anderson is a psychiatrist, owner and founder of the Anderson Clinic in Cincinnati, Ohio, and also podcast host of Psych Waves. Dr. Anderson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I thought we could start by just getting to know you a little bit, maybe even back to, your choice to go into psychiatry and your decision to open your clinic and the kind of work that you do there. So, all of that.
Or just background info. So I am originally a Western Kentucky girl. I did my medical school training at University of Kentucky in Lexington, and then my residency training at University of Cincinnati University Hospital downtown. Knew I wanted to be a doctor probably ever since I was about 8 years old. My primary care doc was this super crotchety, grumpy old man who didn't like anybody except for me. My mom had a multitude of autoimmune diseases, and so we were probably in his office like every other week. And so every time I visited him, he gave me some little trinket or book or model of the anatomy of the foot or wrist bones or what have you. And like the next time he'd see me, he'd quiz me. And I thought he was the smartest dude ever, and I wanted to be just like him. I went into medicine not really knowing what direction I was going to take. I was interested in radiology for a while. I was interested in pathology for a while. But eventually, I did rotations at the VA hospital in Lexington and the VA hospital in Cincinnati. And, just really fell in love with the veterans and especially those who had suffered with post traumatic stress. And part of the reason is one is I'm a literary person. I love people's stories and I love people's backgrounds and, what makes them tick and what makes them think. But another reason is that, just seeing how these folks were suffering and how the original trauma wasn't actually the thing that nearly killed them originally wasn't the thing that was killing them now. The thing that was killing them now was the stories they were telling themselves about the thing, right? Like what it meant to have been in that situation. And a lot of people personalized it, and there are lots of ideas of shame and loss and guilt. And, for our general audience, guilt is I screwed up. You can take ownership, you can change directions the next go round when you make a decision. Shame is I am a screw up. It's an identity statement, right? And so these folks felt like it meant something about them as a person or their character, or that because this happened, they were a bad person or feeling the nasty adjective, right? And so when they started talking about what was happening and we could sort of get them to the idea of not even a positive state, but a neutral state. What if? What if it was an accident? What if it's sort of our play space in therapy, right? What if it was an accident? What if wrong place, wrong time? What if that was just their time? What if? If we could get them to a neutral space of, well, maybe it's not that I'm a bad person. It's maybe that I didn't make a bad decision. Maybe I'm not a horrible, whatever, nasty fill in the blank adjective. Then we could frequently get them to the positive again. And so I kind of look at it as a temperature scale, right? So we're going from everything in the world's my fault. I'm a horrible person to, well, maybe I'm not a bad person, but I made a bad decision. Or maybe I'm not a bad person, but, bad things happen to good and bad people. And then we kind of could move along that trajectory and just to see their lives do a complete 180 when that internal narrative was changed, it was just mind boggling and really cool. So, yeah. My main focus of treatment in several modalities is treatment resistant depression and PTSD. So, for that reason.
Yeah, with that experience and seeing just what can happen when you tune into people's stories and help them reframe them in ways that serve them rather than cut them down. It's incredible what can happen, and would love to hear more about the kinds of treatment that you use at your clinic for people with treatment resistant depression and PTSD.
Sure. So I was trained in my residency mainly with psychodynamic psychotherapy. I did some postgraduate training in psychoanalytic psychotherapy and then a little bit of CBT work. It's a type of therapy that I offer. We also do the traditional medication management, but we also offer ketamine infusions for folks who are treatment resistant, who've tried a number of oral antidepressants and those have failed them. And we also do personalized transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is a mouthful, pure TMS. And
Yes.
so we were the first in the state of Ohio to offer ketamine infusions intravenously. And we are the first in the state of Ohio or Kentucky to offer PRTMS.
Incredible. I would love to hear more about ketamine. It's something that I've had my own personal experience with, and also professionally, I'm training to be able to provide ketamine assisted psychotherapy. I believe strongly in what this medicine can do for us, and I'd love to hear how you got to be the first provider in the area and what it does for people.
How I got to be that really was a matter of right place, right time. I was coming off maternity leave and I was approached by a group outside of Boston who's interested in helping physicians add this to their sort of repertoire. I had heard really awesome things about the research, but I always assumed that you had to be affiliated with a hospital to do it. And so I was a little tentative in that regard. But when I learned that because it's used at such a low dose and over such a long period of time, that its safety was ridiculously high. You could actually offer it on an outpatient setting as long as you had either a nurse, a nurse practitioner, or a CRNA available, and as long as they were trained in ACLS, which is, advanced cardiac life support. Something happens if your throat constricts or if your heart, starts beating out of control, we can deal with it, that sort of thing. But that sort of thing happening is ridiculously rare. Um, and I tell folks ketamine is a bit of an odd actor in that, technically it is an anesthetic, but we don't give it at anesthetic doses, right? And so if you were to have a motor vehicle accident and break your arm and they needed to set the bone, if you went to the ER, you'd be given 2 to 4 times the dosage of ketamine that we are giving you for mood purposes. And it would be given all in one bolus, like all at once. And so your head would psychically dissociate off to Mars. You wouldn't see anything. You wouldn't hear anything. You wouldn't remember anything. And you'd wake up and be like, oh, my arm has a cast on it. That's interesting. You wouldn't connect. For this, we're using a quarter of that dose over the course of 45 minutes to an hour. And with that, you might get a sense or a feeling of mild dislocation. A lot of my patients have told me that they sort of feel like it's a state where you use laughing gas when you do a dental procedure. And so you're like, huh, my hand's moving. Am I moving it or is it moving on its own? Like that weird sense of dislocation, right? But you're always in control of your thoughts and your body. Um, the idea being that maybe we can dissolve some of the defense mechanisms and the ego barriers that keep us from being able to deal with things. Because, especially, and again, my primary focus is PTSD, especially in PTSD, one of the biggest symptoms folks have is avoidance, right? That's a touchy subject. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. I'm just going to push it over here and shove it down or keep myself occupied doing something else or drink or drug it out of my head or doom scroll until I forget about it, sort of thing. And so this doesn't allow for that to happen and it sort of brings it to the forefront. So for some people, they can actually feel a little worse before they start to feel better in the first visit or two. That's called flooding, when things are just kind of coming at them because their defenses are no longer holding back the gigantic amount of symptoms that they've been sort of avoiding. But folks tend to respond to it really well. In some cases, there might be mild nausea or mild headache. In rare cases, there can be throat constriction or elevated blood pressure. But again, we've been doing it for 9, almost 10 years now, and we've had a couple of blood pressure emergencies. That's about it. Really tolerated well, and safety profile is ridiculous. A couple of cool things about ketamine is one, you don't have to stop taking your current antidepressant. And so maybe working that's like kind of 75% of the way, but not all the way there. Or you're maximized on the dose and you can't go any higher. That's one nice thing. Another nice thing is that ketamine has very different mechanisms of action from our current oral antidepressant setup. So typically, if you look at oral antidepressants, when they're prescribed, they're going to be hitting one of three neurotransmitters, and that's going to be serotonin, your happy feel good chemicals, dopamine, which is your reward pathway, or norepinephrine, which is the get you up and get you motivated chemical. It's also the same chemical. It's part of fight or flight, right? And so ketamine actually works on glutamate, and no oral antidepressant out there works on glutamate. And so it's much more rapidly acting, and glutamate's everywhere in the brain. In some areas, it acts like an on switch. In some areas, it acts like the brakes. And so, depending on what you're needing, it can really help reverse things quickly. The other really cool thing is that it's been shown, even after the first visit, whether or not you feel subjectively better, it's actually making connections in between the neurons. And that's what I think is super cool, in that, if there's more communication, just like with your computer, if you have too many tabs open, right, you can't process as quickly. It streamlines everything, and where like you're communicating more, you're increasing your processing speed, you're increasing your ability to make sense of things, which is why ketamine assisted psychotherapy is so fantastic, as sort of hand in hand with doing the ketamine. So while your defenses are down over the next couple of days, you can make those connections easier, and you don't go to try to stuff it down or avoid it or ignore it or do something else to distract yourself. So
Incredible. Everything that you're describing is aligned with what I've been learning and also when I've had my own therapeutic ketamine experiences. So there's both the during experience where you're still present, but there's like this dissociation, this distance that's created as the default mode network and the brain is turned off. All of the thinking, active, go, go, go that's behind the scenes or front and center when you're quiet. And all of a sudden, you've got enough distance from whatever is going on or whatever shows up to say, oh, isn't that interesting? Isn't that curious?
right?
And then for days after, weeks after, really, it's, oh, that happened more easily than it used to. Or, oh, yeah, that link wasn't there before, but now it makes total sense. And so it's incredible. What have you seen in terms of the outcomes for your patients who have this PTSD and treatment resistant depression?
It's absolutely incredible. If I hadn't seen it myself, I would have thought it was a bunch of hokum, honestly, because it's, in 2 or 3 visits, we have people who are non-functional, who aren't working, like, start wearing makeup again and start going to work again, start talking with their families again, start participating in hobbies, life again. I decided I saw a recipe on Pinterest and I wanted to give it a try and just go to Kroger and pick up the items and go cook it. Like, what? This has not been happening for several months or years, and it's a really cool thing to see. It gives people hope that things could get better. What the awesome thing too is, people need boosters from now and again, sometimes once a quarter, a couple times a year. But for the most part, if people can see a glimmer of hope and they start having more what we call behavioral activation, just doing the things, because that's the hell of depression, right? You can see all the things that you need to do on the horizon, but you can't make yourself do it, right? And so if you start doing those things, then you're going to reinforce a positive neurochemistry, and the positive neurochemistry reinforces wanting to do those things. And so that really helps sort of get people out of the abyss just long enough to take it and run with it, right? And so we've seen a good 70 to 80% symptomatic reduction in both PTSD and depression. 40 to 50% with OCD. We've had some folks with complex regional pain syndrome also improve somewhat. Now, we don't give it like the dose that pain clinic doctors do, but even that little bit can have anti-inflammatory properties and anti-pain properties.
What about people who are dealing with generalized anxiety or, right, they don't fit into the criteria that you've described already, but they're also really uncomfortable with the idea of taking a daily medication. So they're not already treating it. Is that
It's
something that
also a
you work
great option because ultimately it can lower your sense of fight or flight, which is kind of ramped up in those folks. And it can sort of put distance in between you and the feeling. I kind of liken it to when couples fight and argue. Like in the midst of an argument, you might call each other names or say things you don't mean. And then, like 15 minutes later, when your amygdalas have calmed down and your frontal lobes have blood flow to them again, why the crap did I say that? That was so rude. Or maybe I ought to address this in a different way. Or maybe we can come to it from a different direction because you're able to get some distance from it, right? And so in the midst, you can't see the forest for the trees. And so it gives you that just a little bit of distance to say, you know what? Yeah, I might have a panic attack on the road, but that's what shoulders are for. I can pull off on an exit at a gas station, call my mom or call my spouse or call a friend or whatever, or do some breathing exercises. And panic attacks don't last all day, they last a few minutes. I'll be okay. I can get back on the road. It's not a big deal, right? And so, once again, getting that distance, providing that sort of sense of separation between the emotion and the idea, but also providing some real world, hey, I do feel better, so I do think I could do this.
Mhm. Absolutely. Now, do you provide any ketamine assisted psychotherapy in your practice?
We don't as of yet. So we have a nurse practitioner who's going to be training in that, but as of right now, we farm it out to folks like you.
Got it. Awesome. I know within your practice it's intravenous ketamine. Are there any other forms
Yes.
of ketamine that you provide? And what about people who are very uncomfortable with needles?
Yes. So Spravato is intranasal S-ketamine, and frequently insurance companies will cover the cost of a couple months worth of treatments if we have a situation where the person is diagnosed with treatment-resistant depression and they have tried and failed at least two, maybe three different oral antidepressants in two different families. And so where insurance won't touch IV ketamine, they will approve Spravato if those criteria have been met. And so Spravato is a great option for folks who are either needle phobic or who really need help with the insurance coverage. The only caveat is slightly increased frequency of visits for a period of time, and you have to have a driver the same way with the IV ketamine. So,
Got it. So you have to take it for longer, you have to come more frequently, but it's a wonderful option if IV medicine doesn't work for you. How does the efficacy compare?
it's close to the same, but slightly under just because the method of delivery decreases the bioavailability. So again, it's to be expected. And again, in the same thing, I want to address this too. A lot of folks are like, well, I could just get ketamine at home now. That's incredibly dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. You could be monitored by a person from afar, 3 states away. What are they going to do if your throat closes up? They can't do anything. And I believe one of the major companies has already had a lawsuit against them for this very reason because a person has died using it. Because part of the issue is they're usually, not always, but usually sublingual lozenges,
Mhm.
and you're supposed to keep it under your tongue for as long as you're with your provider, and they say take it out. Well, if they're starting to feel better, there's nothing going to keep them from putting it back in their mouths again, right? Or overusing it, or again, we don't know how you're going to respond to it,
Mhm.
but in my mind, it would be a lot safer if it was under medical supervision.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for clarifying that. This is not
Yeah.
meant to be just like a, oh, I feel better when I do it. Let me do it on my own whenever I want. That's a
Yeah.
problem.
Plus the oral version is such a lower rate of absorption because your liver chews up like half of it. And so, with the IV, 100% of what we give you is what your brain sees and utilizes. And so we can use this much. And so the side effects are like this, right? And so with this Spravato, they have to 1.5 times the dose to have the same efficacy. With the oral, it's 3 to 4 times the dose. And so you see, as every time we do a step up in dose, there's also a step up in risk and a step up in side effects. And so to me, it's just not worth it. It's not.
Absolutely. What I'm hearing is that because of the way that ketamine impacts the brain by increasing bioavailability of glutamate and regrowing neurons and healing neurons that have really been negatively impacted by what's been going on, it feels as though it's medicine. But my understanding is that it's more of a catalyst for change than it is the healing medicine itself.
Yeah, it really is. And so it's not necessarily regrowing neurons, but it is what they're seeing is, at least in animal models, even after the first intravenous infusion of ketamine, they start seeing an increased density in dendritic spines. And those are the little tree branches from the neurons that sort of connect the neurons to each other. And so it's a catalyst for increased communication between the neurons. It's not necessarily regrowing the neurons, but it is a situation where it's increasing the communication between the neurons. Yeah. So
Thank you for
yeah.
clarifying.
Yeah, no problem.
It's amazing how much what goes on inside of our brains also mirrors, a tree outside, right? The branches that need to be there in order to absorb the sun and be able to have the nourishment that it needs. Just like a tree, we are that same way inside too. I would love to talk some more about prTMS because it's absolutely fascinating and I would love for
Yeah.
listeners to hear about it.
Absolutely. So TMS, or transcranial magnetic stimulation, was developed, I want to say, in the 1980s, as sort of a kinder, gentler version of ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy. And the idea was that you can create a magnetic field around the skull once it passes through the skull, it turns into electrical energy because magnetic fields can pass through anything, right? And so the hope was that we wouldn't have to crank the juice up so high, so to speak, and it'd be like a kinder, gentler version. So people wouldn't have to be intubated or sedated, wouldn't have to miss work, wouldn't have to have short-term memory loss, as sometimes happens with ECT, which is still the gold standard, by the way, if medications fail. So, but it took out a lot of the side effect profile of ECT. But it's sort of a one-size-fits-all treatment in terms of they treat at one position, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and is a spot on the brain that is the least likely to induce seizures when it's electrically stimulated. So it's a good place to stimulate it, right? But the problem is they're giving the treatment at a frequency of 10 hertz. And what does that mean? So our brain's resting engine idle, so to speak, is our alpha wave. We have delta waves, which are what we are when we're in sleep mode. We have theta waves, which is what we are when we're halfway between dreaming and wakefulness. Our alpha wave is our resting, zen, contemplative, meditative, awake and alert, but not interacting. So it's like the sort of meditative state, right? Our beta is what you and I are in now, I hope. Eyes open, talking, moving around, that
Yes.
sort of thing. Gamma is like being chased by a Bengal tiger. And so the goal for TMS was to treat at the person's alpha wave state. And so the average human alpha wave is about 10 hertz. And that means that you sample the world around you with all of your senses 10 times a second, which is really cool to think about. So think
Yes,
of
it
that
is.
as your computer's processing speed. Okay. But the problem is it had a similar efficacy as to oral antidepressants, which has only worked about a third of the time. About a third of the population has an alpha wave exactly at 10 hertz. Coincidence? I think not. So, Dr. Kevin Murphy out of San Diego is a pediatric radiation oncologist by trade. He nuked kiddos' brain tumors, right? Was finding with a lot of these more targeted treatments, the kiddos were living a lot longer, but their quality of life sucked, right? They acted depressed, but they weren't responding to antidepressants. And they kind of colloquially called it chemo brain. And so he's like, here we have this really fantastic treatment in TMS, but it's a one size fits all. It's like if you had breast cancer and you went to your oncologist and like, I'll just give you the medication for colon cancer. I'm like, no, it's not the same thing, right? And so if your brain is functioning better at 11.5 hertz, giving you a 10 hertz wave would actually slow you down by a factor of 15. Or if you were close to a dementing illness and you're running at an 8, you may never get to a 10. And so it might be agitating and irritating to you, right? And so his idea was, why don't we see, first of all, how fast your internal processing speed is? First things first. Let's see, how fast does your wave need to be? And the second thing, let's look at an EEG to see, is your brain speaking the same frequency across the board? What if I fell out of a tree when I was 12 and I looked and I acted ADHD because my frontal lobe was going 8 hertz, but the rest of my brain was going 11? Medications can't treat for that. Because if you give me a medication, it's going to speed me up globally, right? So the front's going to be like, yes, I can think. And the back part of your brain is going to be like, what the hell? I was already going fast enough and now I'm agitated and irritable. And that could account for some of the folks who have the response of the stimulants that they do, is maybe they're not truly ADHD.
Part of their brain can benefit, but part can't.
I know. At least 90% of the time, when I have a patient who we've labeled as treatment resistant depression, we get an EEG on them, and like 9 times out of 10, they are concussed
How can you tell in an EEG that they were concussed?
because the healthy part of their brain is going the healthy speed, and the part of their brain that was concussed is going the slower speed. It shows up as a slower wave. Isn't that wild?
That is
It's just
wild. That's
like if
fascinating.
you're a runner and you tweak your knee, you can't go as fast as you went before, right? Because you blow out your knee. And so you can only go as fast as that injured part allows you to go. And so if the neurons have been physically traumatized, they're going to slow down to preserve function without killing themselves. And so they're slowing down to preserve function. And sometimes you have somebody who had a car accident 20 years ago. Sometimes the wave will make it back over to close to where their healthy wave was, but not quite. And so you get some cognitive dissonance, you get some decision fatigue, you get, do I do this, do this? There's sort of analysis paralysis, right? Because they're literally, the brain is functioning on two different channels.
That is fascinating, and it makes so much sense why a global treatment like a stimulant or even an antidepressant isn't going to have a balanced effect when different parts of the brain need different things.
Exactly. And so what's really fascinating to me is I think this is going to prove to be one of the most widely underdiagnosed problems that we have in mental health today because I mean the brain is like unset jello. It's so soft. And you could have a car accident. Maybe you're only going 30 miles an hour and you were T-boned, but going from 30 to 0 is going to cause some damage. And so it's just like shaken baby syndrome, that sheer force and the axons just kind of they lose their legs, right? And so it's really, I think, important to recognize how much this can play a part not only in childhood development and student athletes, but also like you may not have had a mental health history and you get a concussion and all of a sudden you're depressed, anxious, and you look like you're ADHD and maybe you're not sleeping well. Maybe you did have a mental health history and the concussion makes it worse.
These are all pieces of information that we can take into account subjectively, like a provider can know all of this stuff, but how to actually treat it is the important piece here because you can know it, but then what do you do about it?
Exactly. So with our treatment, we get an EEG in office and it's a wireless headset, so it only takes like 20-30 minutes, not like 2 hours in the hospital, right? And we get a compressed version of that information that we can kind of see what your alpha waves are doing or not doing, or if you're producing alpha waves and where they're at and how fast they're going, and whether or not, is the front part of the brain going as fast as the back part of the brain or vice versa. But also, with our treatment, because we know exactly where we're aiming, so to speak, we don't have to use the high amplitude that standard TMS does. So, causes less headaches, almost no risk of seizure. We could treat right over the motor strip. So, people with mild cerebral palsy or recovering from strokes can actually benefit in terms of motor coordination. And it can specifically help what that person needs. So let's say you had depression and ADHD, then we focus our treatment here and here. If let's say you were recovering from a stroke, most of our treatment is going to be focused on here. And so we sort of liken our treatment to a sniper instead of a bomb blast. It's very specific and not a lot of collateral damage, right? And so we
Yes.
tell people like, why does this type of treatment work? Well, if we're trying to enhance a person's healthy alpha wave, what we're doing is we're stimulating your entire brain at that healthy alpha wave speed, which is different for you than it is for me. And that will cause the neurons that are going too fast to slow down. And the neurons are going too slow, recruited to. So I liken it to let's go to the gym and only work out your right bicep 24/7. What has to get bigger? Your right bicep. Now, if you sit around and do absolutely nothing all day, your right bicep's going to be huge and everything else is going to atrophy. And that's the point. We want to kind of knock out those guys that are too fast and causing anxiety. We want to knock out those guys that are going too slow and causing depression, or from concussion, or from drug and alcohol use, or from poor sleep. And we want to bring them back to your healthy alpha wave.
That's incredible. And I'm not sure I entirely caught how that actually happens. How does the slow get sped up and the fast get slowed down?
So so we magnetically stimulate your brain at different areas according to what your EEG says your speed. So let's say, Rachel, you had a speed of 10.8 hertz, okay? Then we're going to dial in the machine 10.8 hertz at different locations in your brain that you might need so as to recruit all the neurons to go 10.8 hertz. So that time that you fell out of a tree when you were 12 and the front part of your brain is going 8 hertz, it's going to forcibly make it fire at 10.8 hertz while it's being stimulated. So it's not coaxing it or please do this or I'll give you a cookie if you do this. It's no, it's forcibly requiring your brain to fire its neurons at that speed, whatever your speed is.
That's incredible. That is incredible.
It's like physical training of the muscles, right? Over time, you get stronger, and then the training starts increasing your metabolic capacity to do other things outside of that in the training. You might notice, hey, I can hop over a fence now, or hey, I can kick butt at pickleball now, and I couldn't get across before, or hey, now I can run laps with my kid, or like you couldn't do those things before you went to the gym and started running on the treadmill and started doing weight training, right? Now you can do other things. What happens is the brain sort of takes over healing itself after that period of time. You come in daily, Monday through Friday, for about 6 to 8 weeks, more if you have multiple issues. But we do a repeat EEG every week just to kind of see how the brain's responding to treatment if we need to tweak it. So it's moving in the right direction, we'll double down and keep doing what we're doing. If it's not, then we'll tweak something to try to push it forward. And so, but it's just like physical training in that we can see results in real time, and it allows for the brain to kind of take it and run with it after the fact. We've seen frequently folks coming back for quarterly checkups, haven't had treatment. Repeat EEG looks even better than the last time they left us. Isn't that
Oh, that's
cool?
incredible. Yeah, the body continues to heal over time. It sounds like it's a big commitment up front to be able to do this, but it's not long. Like, 20, you said 20 to 30 minutes, people can drive themselves, so it's
Absolutely. Yeah,
doable.
they're not impaired at all. So,
Wonderful.
and
And
their
then,
requirements for insurance to cover 36 treatments are the same as Spravato. Treatment resistant depression, tried and failed at least two different antidepressants and two different drug classes. But obviously, you could pay for it out of pocket as well if it's a matter of PTSD or OCD or concussion or other illnesses.
have you seen a difference in efficacy of ketamine versus PRTMS, even though I know it's apples and oranges, but just in your anecdotal experience?
So we've had a much higher rate of success with pure TMS, but acutely ketamine is the way to go. So if you have somebody who's actively suicidal or just non-functional, like I said, ketamine can be the thing that lifts them out of the abyss, but it does so temporarily if you can't wait, right? Pure TMS, it might be a week or two before you start feeling better as opposed to a visit or two. And so if it's more of a chronic condition or you've already had the ketamine and you want to kind of keep improving, it will help treat the initial issue, not just symptomatically.
That makes so much sense. Really just depends on what's going on and what your needs are, but they both have tons of efficacy.
As I was about to say, we've had our highest rates of success with PTSD because in certain areas of the brain, you're going both too fast and too slow. So you see the folks who have PTSD who have the hypervigilance, who are always on guard, always waiting for the next danger to befall them, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then you can only be hypervigilant for so long until your adrenals like give up the ghost and say, screw you, clown, I'm out of here. And then you're depressed and you're non-functional. And so both the brain going too fast and too slow at the same time, we've had close to an 88% reduction in symptoms for, and yeah, studies out of Texas show that, like a side by side comparison with TMS and PRTMS. The VA veterans with PTSD had a 20% reduction in trauma scores with a standard TMS over 6 weeks, and the PRTMS group had a reduction of 88% reduction in symptoms, trauma
That's
scores.
incredible.
I know. With depression and anxiety, it's more the 70-80% range, very similar to the ketamine. With OCD, it's 50% or so.
Why do you think this is not more widespread, PRTMS specifically?
I believe because it's more of a grassroots scenario. Like Dr. Murphy is more of a clinician than a researcher, and so he's been busy treating patients. He doesn't have mega bucks university funding, and he doesn't have like big pharma funding and all this other kind of good stuff. And so it's literally just been clinicians have seen, folks have seen, other doctors have seen, and they kind of get on board with it, and it's sort of like spread in that way. But yeah, so many even clinicians in our area are like, wait, what are you doing? What is this? Again, the biggest issue is, we don't have big university dollars to market it and spread the word, but it's some of the coolest things I've ever seen. When Dr. Murphy showed me a video of his own son who is on the autism spectrum, going from non-functional and kind of being asked to not return to his school because of behavioral outbursts to being a speaking, polite, socially appropriate individual who is now at university studying to be a mechanical engineer. I was like, holy crap. Yeah, it I was like, okay, I don't care what we have to do. We have to do this because it's one of those situations where you feel like you're going to be in the next wave of evolution of how things are treated. And for so long I feel like psychiatry was like we've been throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks because the brain is sort of a big black box, right? And this is like it's not. It we can see this is working, this is not. This is how we can tweak it. This is really cool.
Gives me the chills. It really is exciting stuff. And even though it is not more widespread and widely available, it certainly is in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so I'm so
It is indeed.
appreciative that we could get the word out even more so people become even more aware. Is there anything else that you want to share about your practice or about the work that you do that you want people to know about?
Yeah, we treat people like family, not another number. And it's part of the reason that I didn't want to work for a big university outfit because I feel like you have to wait so long to be seen by the doctor. You have to get in with a therapist, and sometimes that can be months long wait. And they don't remember anything about you anyway. And with us, you can typically get in to be seen in a couple weeks. And, you have direct contact with your providers. It's me and two nurse practitioners, and an infusion nurse. So, depending, or a prTMS tech, depending on which direction you go. But you have access to us directly. We can get back to you with your questions being answered or medications being refilled in a day or two, usually. And so, because we're a small outfit, we really take the time to get to know you, and we care about you as an individual. Our offices are set up like kind of like a nice living room instead of cold clinical detached weirdness from the 70s. I've seen a number of those, like this orange upholstery from 1968. Cool.
Sounds like my
But
clinical
you can
training.
attest to our offices.
I
But yeah,
can.
so we do our best to try to maintain a warmer, friendlier, more humane environment.
I couldn't agree more. Having sent multiple loved ones your way to be able to make sure that they have the care that they need and having participated in some of that care, I cannot speak highly enough about you and the work that you do and the incredible service that you provide. And yeah, I do believe that what you just described about people feeling like they're treated like family and that you really care and that it's comfortable and really tuned in to people's needs and comfort level. I cannot say enough. And also, I'm super interested in diving more into learning about prTMS and getting the word out even more because ketamine, I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
I'm already that ship has already sailed. I am a complete cheerleader for what that medication, what that medicine can do. But it's
For
so
sure.
cool to find new things that work and really dive in deep. But then we got to make sure people know, which is why we're having this conversation right now.
Absolutely. And I love too, like our whole staff is just the coolest. Our admin is so sweet and personable and kind and welcoming and friendly. And Brent, who does a lot of the ketamine and Spravato infusions and intranasal stuff, he sort of grew up at Children's Hospital ER. And so literally this guy could be falling, raining down fire, and he would say, we should probably find shelter relatively quickly. And that tone and cadence, like nothing perturbs that man. And that's like the perfect, like you can be screaming, freaking out, nervous as all get out, and he'll just sit there, talk to you, and hold your hand and be like, okay, we're good. Well, if you need a few minutes, just let me know. I'll get you something to drink. And just like, mm-hmm.
I have felt that energy and I know exactly what you're talking about. And what a wonderful space holder, right? A person who can hold space to make sure that you're okay no matter what. Although hopefully people aren't screaming too much in your office.
No, every once in a blue moon, but no, we've had some, nervous Nellies who are a bit, kind of unsure about what to expect and lots of anticipatory anxiety, right? Because you don't know us from Adam and you don't know is this safe and you don't know what it's gonna feel like. And then after that first visit, they're like, oh, hey guys. It's just
Yes,
like it
exactly.
normalizes things.
Yeah, and that's so important to feel comfortable, especially when you're going to be coming back repeatedly for a while. But that does, I think, build so much comfort going from how nerve wracking it can be to start a new process, a new treatment
Yes.
process with new people in a new
Yes.
place. But I think people get over that very quickly with you guys because it just feels like, oh, that's my family over there too, the ones who take really good care of me and make sure that I can get back to living my life in the way that I want to, which is the goal of all of this.
Yeah, we're very real. We don't put on a lot of airs. We're just what you see is what you get, which is really nice. I mean, we're professional obviously, but at the same time it's like kind of the golden rule. If I were freaking out and if nothing had worked for me and I felt like whatever this treatment was my last hope and I'm coming to you freaking out, I'd be like, if you're calm, cool, collected, but friendly and warm and welcoming, it's like, okay, maybe things will be okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what we all deserve, is to be received in that way. And I am so appreciative that you've taken the time with me to explain all of this and share about yourself and your practice and the very important work that you're doing. And how can people find you?
So you can find us online at www.andersonclinic.net. You can find my podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. We are called Psych Waves. And if you are more of a social media person like Facebook or TikTok or Instagram, we are at Anderson Clinic Cincy with a Y. And if you're old fashioned and use the phone, you can call us at 513-321-1753.
Awesome. I appreciate all of that information and I love your podcast. Psych Waves has been so interesting and informative, all these different topics. So I can't recommend it enough. And thank you so much, Teresa, for taking the time to be here with me today. I have really enjoyed our time and sharing about the very important work that you're doing.
My absolute pleasure. And it's always such a joy to meet with other people in this space who do something slightly different from what I do, to know how we can help patients in different ways, but also how, just on a personal level, we can help each other literally with our extended families and friends. So it's lovely to know.
Exactly. I know that I have single-handedly boosted your your I keep sending people your way, people in my personal life and my professional life, because once you know that help is
Like, oh,
available
you're
and
one of
you trust
Rachel's.
another one of Rachel's. Exactly. So I'm open as well if there's anyone in your life who I can help, who you work with, but really truly just I think what we have talked about today will help people. And so thank you, thank you,
Very cool.
thank you for your time.
My absolute pleasure.
Everyone, thank you for listening. I really appreciate your time as well. And until next time, take care.